that we're working with Kazakhstan and we want to make it a much more relevant organization for that region. And I wonder if you have a particular view about that.
I think the fact that I don't think any of my fellow panelists were particularly aware of the initiative does indicate that it doesn't have much of a role to play at the moment, perhaps. It might do, of course. It might do in the future. Turkey, of all the states that are party to that organisation, I think Turkey definitely has the most capability to create something of it. But whether it can really interact with the OSCE or another regional organisation like that at a comparable level, I think at the moment that's still far too far ahead in the future. There is still so much rivalry between states in Central Asia, and there are still so many differences and still so many conflicts, of course, and areas of rivalry that it would take a great deal of work to get this organisation moving, especially when there are so many other multilateral initiatives that these states belong to, notably, of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Russian-sponsored Collective Security Treaty Organization, and the OSCE itself, of course. Many states prefer to work through these issues in that sense. So, of course, it would be encouraging if we do see more regional initiatives of this kind, but there are already a great number of these, and none of them have proved very significant so far. So I think the jury's still out on that one.
Yeah, I would just comment in a much broader sense that I think Turkey's efforts to join multiple organizations everywhere, I mean, I can't imagine anything more in keeping with the EU philosophy of how international relations should be run than joining organizations and linking people with all kinds of associations, and on top of that, abandoning the idea of military conflict as a way to settle these things. I would think the EU would love this, but does Turkey have the clout to really change? I think to join these organizations and become involved in itself is extremely worthwhile. Whether Turkey's power will be sufficient to really change things remains to be seen, but joining is the first critical step. You want to?
On this, maybe could I disagree with my co-panelist on some issues, or?
No,
no, I can't. Okay. No, because I don't agree with. If I understood Alexander well, he said that it was a good thing to link the Armenia-Turkey issue with the Karabakh issue, and I don't agree there, because I do not agree with your calculation that a deal between Turkey and EU would decrease the pressure on Armenia to be more flexible on Karabakh. I mean, this has been the position of the Turkish government for 15 years, and it didn't work. It didn't work. I think it's time to do something else. I think that a deal between Turkey and Armenia would make it more possible for Armenia to make a sensible policy on Karabakh, and to pressure them into withdrawal hasn't worked, and I think it won't work if that is the policy. So I would be very happy for Turkey and Armenia to strike a deal. I think it's beneficial to both countries and beneficial to Azerbaijan in the long run. So to link the two, I think, was a mistake by the Prime Minister that will cost Turkey dearly.
I would agree with that very, very strongly. I mean, it may well be that Alex's judgment about what is likely to happen turns out to be correct, but in terms of sort of Turkey's strategic interests, and I would argue the West's strategic interests, to couple these things is not smart. If you want to transform the situation, I think the best way to do it is to open the border and to have this rapprochement succeed. There is a cost to be paid in terms of public opinion in Turkey, public opinion has its affinities with the Azeri case, but I think there are bigger things at stake, and you've got to try to do something different. And I would hope that that's what would happen.
Yes, sir. And if you could identify yourself.
Working from Embassy of Azerbaijan, it's exactly the point you just made, that it would be beneficial for Azerbaijan. I just want to know how, as Azeri diplomat, I'm very much interested to know that. And just giving some background from practical perspective and not from academic considerations. When Turkey-Armenia issue started, and when every meeting between Turkish and Armenian diplomats or officials took place, and when protocols were signed, there were meetings between Azerbaijan and Armenian diplomats and officials within the Minsk process. And every time when there was development between Turkey and Armenia, there was backtrack within the process of Nagorno-Karabakh. So here I see sort of disconnect of what you're proposing and what you're arguing for and what we witness from practical perspective. So please explain to me how we can persuade me that it's beneficial to Azerbaijan. Thank you.
You explain me why it didn't work, your policy over 15 years. Why did your policy didn't work 15 years?
Oh, you mean Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijani policy is to force Armenia to do something. That hasn't worked and it won't work. You have to seduce, stimulate, make it possible for Armenia to open up on that issue, and that is better. And you are in a better position as Turkey, as the EU, whoever, to do that if Turkey and Armenia solve their problems, open up. That's good for Armenia economically, politically, and I think it makes it possible for them to strike a deal on Karabakh. The policy, the old policy, is pressuring them, pushing them, isolating them, trying to see that they can't survive and then they have to do it, hasn't worked. So, I mean, you have to prove that your policy worked. It hasn't worked, so I think it's time for something else. Will it work? I don't have a guarantee that it will work, but I'm pretty sure that the old policies hasn't worked. So I think it's time for something else. And that's why I feel sorry for Turkey that the Prime Minister, in a way, spoiled the game by shortly after there was the signing of the protocols, coming out with the old position again, backtracking on what I think was a step forward in signing the protocols and making it independent of a move on Karabakh. Since then, you have seen that all parties start repeating their old conditions again. This has made it more difficult. I think it's also bad for Azerbaijan, for your country, to go back to the old situation, linking everything and solving nothing.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in, I mean, I do. It's not so much that I think it's necessarily a good thing, but I do think to an extent it's inevitable in a sense. I think as we discussed previously to the session, I think what needs to be done, not necessarily a deal in which we'd have a signed document saying that the protocols will be ratified and Armenia will then withdraw, but certainly an understanding. As you say, I mean, it would be very beneficial for Karabakh if Turkey and Armenia open their borders. But I think there does need to be, at the very least, an implicit assumption, a kind of understanding that Armenia will have to not so much make a concession, but will have to, sort of meet Turkey and Azerbaijan, closer to halfway in that sense.
Yes, Joshua, you wanted to comment on this.
I just want to jump in because there's a tendency in this town and people who get very specific on different areas to get very narrowly focused and not take a broader picture of this. And I think this is exactly the example in which the domestic and the external collide. The reason that the Prime Minister linked the two is because of the pressure he got at home in terms of the nationalists, right? And so, it's pushed him into a very untenable position, which now there's this international problem where the two things are linked. And given the fact that we're sitting in this building, which is going to be another hot spot in the next month or so in terms of U.S.-Turkish relations because of the Armenian resolutions coming through, I think it's important to take a broader context on this and to understand the dynamics at play and to see what the pressures are on the Prime Minister and the AKP, and also understand, this is why there are experts. This is why there are people who study these things and need to be able to kind of understand both the domestic and the external. And this is precisely the type of place where you need to have larger actors that have stepped in. And up until this point, there's not been a will to do that. Until those major players come in, whether it's in the Middle East peace process or whether it's in the Nagorno-Karabakh issue or whether it's the Turkish-Armenian rapprochement, there has not been a will. And that's a question of where does that global leadership come from?
Mm-hmm. Ian, would you care to comment on where you think this will go in Congress and the implications of it in Turkey?
I mean, I wouldn't I hesitate even to predict. I mean, this is a perennial issue, as you will all here probably realize. The sort of mood in Washington now